All right, so I was scrolling through my list that I keep of all the questions and comments and suggestions that all of you give me for video topics about running a candle business or candle making in general or whatever. That is a massive list, by the way. However, I'm always willing to add more to it. So just keep throwing them at me and we'll just keep adding to the list. And eventually I'll make it through a large portion of them anyways. So anyways, I was going through that list and then it kind of dawned on me, instead of me trying to choose which one to answer next or do a video on next, why don't we ask Google? After all, it's going to give me the most search questions, right? At least in theory. So I'm gonna pop up Chrome here in guest mode, incognito mode. That way so we're getting like a clean slate and it's not filtering any results based off of things that I've searched for in the past. We're gonna open up that browser, we're gonna go to Google, and we are going to ask Google basically just general like candle making questions, and it should give us a lot of the commonly asked ones, and I thought that would be a little fun. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Here we go. I'm gonna go to Google, and we're going to do candle making question. Hey, look, that came right up. Now, on Google, it kind of lists specific questions that people ask. So rather than like going through like articles and blog posts and all that kind of stuff, we're just going to go straight to the questions. We're going to start with what we see here, and then every time we dive into one, it should give us some more to answer. Number one, what are good questions to ask about candles? Well, that's sort of meta, isn't it? Like, that's the point of this video, is what are good questions? Like, I'm trying to come up with questions that are asked about candle making, and the first question is, what are good questions asked? This might not go very well. All right, we're going to skip that one. Number two, what are some fun facts about candle making? Fun facts. It's a growing industry every single year. That's not super fun, but it is relevant. 7 out of 10 households on average, actually that number's gone up. I think it's like 8 or 9 out of 10 now, burn candles. 7 of them are regularly burn candles, and then 8 or 9 at some point throughout the year are burning candles for a period of time. The majority of candle customers are female. However, the proportion of candle businesses run are actually pretty evenly split between both male and female. So that's kind of interesting. However, even recently, over the last probably decade, the number of male customers has drastically increased because there's a lot of niche and theme-based businesses, man candles, things like that sports-related, outdoorsy. There's like a ton of different themes out there that has led itself to being enjoyed by a lot more people than they used to be. It's also probably why the candle industry in general continues to see an uptick every single year. Another fun fact is that candle making has been around for ages. It's like thousands of years. I don't know that they know exactly when it was, but most believe it started with the Egyptians back, 5,000 plus years ago. And they used mostly beeswax back then and tallow, which is an animal fat. So wax itself has changed significantly over time. The different materials besides wax have been changed so many times over the years. There's a lot more fragrance oils these days. There are tons of different wick choices, tons of different vessels, pillar candles, wickless candles, wax melts. The process of candle making has changed so much over time. But man, even in the past 10 years, 20 years, there's been just crazy advancements when it comes to candle making. So I don't know. We could probably go on and on and on about fun facts about candle making. In fact, that might be a video topic itself. Let me know if you'd be interested. All right, what not to do when making candles. Again, that's a very long topic. Actually, instead of answering that one specifically, I'm going to link a video here below in the description of this video. I'm going to link a video that I did that says don't do this, or like something about the worst candle mistakes or the worst things you can do with candle making, something like that. You'll see the video. I'll pop it up here on the screen. Check that one out. That was a fun video because it was sort of me being ironic and sort of sarcastic, talking about all the things to do with candle making, except for it was actually the opposite. So anyways, check out the video out. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a fun video. The reason I want to go to it in this video is there's just so much, but I guess I could highlight a few things. One is don't provide finished products to someone that you haven't tested. I think that is a given, but believe it or not, there's a lot of brand new candle makers that don't really know about the testing process. So even if you are provided a recipe from a supplier's website or someone else you know, and they say, use this jar, use this wax, use this oil, use this wick, you need to test it yourself because there's so many variables and factors that can affect how something burns, and you want to make sure it's safe. So I would 100% say don't provide a finished product without testing it yourself. Another thing that I would say is don't rely on information solely from other people. So trust but verify, sort of similar to what I just said, and that includes me too. So anything that I tell you in all my videos, it's meant to help you and guide you, but I would still take everything that is said with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? So go test yourself, confirm, and validate the information provided. So again, trust but verify. Before we move on to the next one, I think the other thing I would say is try not to get so pinned down to one type of material and one supplier. I do think that's the best way to start, but eventually you need to make sure you have like a plan B. So if you were to run short on a certain material or supply and you can't get it from your normal supplier, you don't want to just be down and not be able to do anything about it. So it's really important to have a contingency plan. So have a backup to your original, and having a backup to a backup is even better. There's a phrase that I really like that I use a lot, and it goes, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. In other words, if you only have 1 of something and you were to run out of that, you have no backup, then that means you have nothing. You have nothing left. 2 is 1, meaning you've got 1 plus a backup. And that is really, really important because you always want to at least be able to provide 1 of something or have 1 of something so that you can keep moving forward. So that would be the few things that I would say. All right, so let's get back in. What makes a candle sell the most? This is an easy one. According to the National Candle Association on their website, candles.org, and this is all done through market research, the number one thing that sells the most for candles is fragrance. Not necessarily cold throw versus hot throw, that's all speculative, but just fragrance in itself. That is what is going to catch the attention of customers the most from the point that they see it, walk to it, grab it, and decide to take it home. And then that's often what people go back for, right, is fragrance. Number 2 has actually been color or aesthetics, the visual look of a candle. So not necessarily the color of the wax, although that can help, but also the color and the design of the jar, because they want to make sure that it fits in their home with their decor. So that's always been number 2. Strangely enough, is you got to kind of go down further in the list before you get to wax type. I know a lot of people, especially new candle makers, think that the type of wax being used is what really drives the market and what customers care the most about. To be perfectly honest, speaking frankly, customers don't know or care much about what wax is being used. They just don't know. They're not involved in the industry like we are. So if you're not like a car person, right, you take your car to the shop and they're going to fix it and they're going to order the parts, the materials, and everything they need to do the job. You don't necessarily know or care exactly what brand or type of parts they're using, as long as it's what the vehicle needs and it does the job. Again, that's assuming that you don't really care or you're not heavily invested in cars in general. If you're a mechanic or something, then just disregard everything I just said. I know it is important. I know it does make a difference, but the point is the average customer just doesn't know and just doesn't honestly care that much. So again, what sells the most is fragrance. However, every single year I would say what is sort of catching up is these other factors. So every year, the aesthetics and visual appeal, how it fits into your home decor, tends to increase a little bit every single year because people are going for that look. Also, sustainability and packaging and other factors, even wax type, all of these are increasing every single year, but it is still much further down the list than fragrance and visuals. Let's click into one of these here and see what else we get. Do candles float in water? Well, I mean, they can. I mean, pretty much anything can float in water if you put it on a raft or a boat or something. And essentially, it's the same thing when it comes to candles. Don't put a jar into the water, but if you have a little tea light, that'll probably float in the water. It's light. Some people put candles and wax and a flame like in something that can then float on water. I don't really know exactly what that question's asking or the purpose of it, but I think I've answered it. I don't know. Will candles melt in the car? I mean, candles will melt anywhere. The temperature is hotter than the melt point of the wax. So whether that's in a car, in a garage, in your house, sitting on your front porch, yes, the melt point of the wax is what's going to determine when it starts to melt. Do candles expire? That's a really hard one to answer. There's some nuance here, so I'll try my best. In general, no, not really. Especially your standard traditional candles. Most of your paraffin and parasoy candles don't really expire. In fact, a lot of candles just get stronger as they sit around. So no, in that sense. Wow. More and more these days, there's a lot more organic type of blends or soy blend candles and soy waxes. Those materials, by nature, will eventually start to kind of break down or alter. They're not as resistant or stable, I should say. And so they will, over time, change. Now, they might change their characteristics as far as the color, their fragrance throw, how they burn with a wick. And so, yeah, they can definitely change over time. We've probably all witnessed that. As far as expiring, it just kind of depends on the very specific components in your candle. So that could be the wax type. That could certainly be the fragrance oils. But again, once they've combined into one product, that will make them last longer generally. But there's no set way to answer that question, unfortunately. I would say most of the time it's not something you got to worry about. If you're a candle maker and you're making candles and they're selling within that same kind of several months or year, a couple of years, you're fine. You're probably fine. But yeah, if they sit around long enough, depending on the type of materials being used, they certainly could go bad or change at the very least. When candles burn, where does the wax go? All right, a little scientific, but I'll do my best here. So basically, the process is called combustion. And the way that works is it takes a fuel source combined with oxygen. In this case, the fuel source is wax, the wax in your candle. And then when it reacts with the oxygen, which is at the flame, that's when it does combust and it changes to a gas, water vapor, and so on. And the way that travels is obviously through the wick. So the wick serves sort of like a straw or a vehicle to get the wax, the fuel, to the flame, where again was where the fuel mixes with oxygen and basically turns that into an energy source. So that fuel gets moved to the wick, it is transformed into an energy source, and that's where you get the flame and the light. That's what keeps the flame going. That's what keeps the candle going. That's why when you run out of wax, the flame goes out. Or if the wick isn't properly matched with the wax and they're not doing a good enough job to work together, or the wick isn't large enough to provide enough fuel, if you send the wick too much fuel, in other words, the wick is oversized, then you get way too big of flames and way too much smoke and soot and large carbon buildups because you get incomplete combustion, or not efficient combustion, I should say. Then once it's turned into the energy, it turns basically into a little gas. So you see a little bit of carbon, you see water vapor. That's mostly what happens to the wax as it dissipates into the air. And then if you have an improper combustion or improper balance, that's when you get some smoke and some soot occasionally. All right, so there you go. That's my best attempt at the scientific answer for how that works. Where did candles originally come from? So we talked about this earlier in the very first question, I think. They don't know exactly, but most believe that the Egyptians started candles with beeswax. They started using tallow, which is an animal fat. And then over the years, they kept coming up with different versions, different ways to make candles. And then here we are today with umpteen different types of waxes to use and whole different process than you used to. Also a different purpose. Candles started as a light source, and then they became a way to infuse home fragrance and other purposes as well, religious, ritual ceremonies, and so on. Are candles vegan? Mostly not, no. There are vegan waxes, and if they're used properly with the right type of other oils, and as long as everything else that is involved in the candle also is vegan, then yes, you can make a vegan candle, but it's not super common. Are candles bad for you? I don't know that I want to touch this question with a 10-foot pole, but anything can be bad for you. Water can be bad for you if it's not used properly. So that's my answer to candles as well. Candles are a safe product to use if they are made properly and used properly. And so as a candle maker, your focus is on making candles that are safe to use. They burn safely. So you want to follow guidelines and listen to your suppliers and manufacturers about what materials work the best together. Try to get in proper wicking. The biggest risk to candles easily is still the fact that there's a flame. And that flame is in your house, right? So that's why it's important to test your candles, properly wick your candles with the right wick type and the right wick size. I use Premier 700 wicks for like 95% of my products. I now sell them as a distributor. You'll see them linked below this video. And the reason I like to use those wicks a lot is they work with a variety of different types of waxes, which means most candle makers can use them. Also, they have so many incremental sizes. There's 29 different sizes that range in little increments, and that helps you dial in very specific wick sizing, which makes your candles the most optimal. So they burn efficiently and safely. So that is, again, why I'm a big advocate of those wicks. But I digress on that. Other wicks work great too. So I'm not trying to just say there's only one wick type to use, just never mind. They just need to be made safely. And then the other side of that is to use them safely. Now, you're not the customer for your candles, so you've got to do the best job to do two things. One, pretend you're a customer and burn your candles like you think customers might. So I always do standard burn tests, but then I also like to power burn mine and kind of push them to the limits a little bit and make sure that if a customer isn't following the guidelines perfectly, is my candle still behaving safely? The other thing that you should do is provide your customers with the right information so that they know how to burn candles safely. A candle care card warning labels on your candles, FAQ section on your website, basically just saying like, here's how you burn a candle properly, here's what you should do, trim your wicks, burn for no more than 4 hours or so at a time, and so on. Help educate your customers. That will also make your candles safer and better for you to use. So besides safety, can candles be bad for you or affect you? That's going to come down to each individual. If you've got sensitivities to certain types of materials or certain types of fragrances or oils, then there's no way to say like one candle is 100% safe for everyone, because you don't know what some sensitivity someone might have. So I don't know that you can really say that unequivocally, but I would say in general, no, candles are not bad for you, and in general, candles are safe to use. Just do your best to keep them that way. Let's expand these other ones here. What makes a perfect candle? Nothing. No such thing. No, in all seriousness, there's no way to answer that question like seriously. Like, there's no way to determine what a perfect candle would be. It's just too subjective, right? However, I think a perfect candle is a candle that a customer likes enough to take home, and then they take it home and burn it, and then come back to buy another one. What other possible outcome would you have wanted? To me, that's a perfect candle. They bought one, they bought another. Doesn't get any better than that. Do candles make money? Well, they can. You can also lose money. So it just depends. It really just depends. Yes, in general, you should be pricing your candles. If you're looking to sell your candles as a business, you need to know the cost of your candles, the cost to make those candles, the cost of the materials, and the overall cost to basically make a finished product. I've got tons of videos on this on the channel, so check those out. And then once you know your cost, then you need to price your candles for profit in order to profit. You don't have to, but if you want to profit, they need to be priced to profit. Again, I've got an entire video talking about different pricing models. And I want to be clear on that video. I've had a few people say that some of the models are not 100%. They don't take into account every single little cost, and it's not a perfect formula. No, it's not. It's meant to be an overview of the model. I have no idea what the costs are for everyone to make their candles. So I just had to use some examples. The point is, once you know your cost, then you can price your candles, and the margin is your profit. The difference between what you price and the cost is the margin. That's what your profit would be. But like most things, the money's in volume. So if you have a profit margin of $4 or $5 a candle, that's not a lot, right? So you need to sell a lot of them. You might be selling a luxury candle where your profit margin's a lot more. You're making $20 a candle. Well, you need to make less, but it also costs you more to make your candle to begin with. So can candles make money? Absolutely. I run a candle business. And a lot of people here on this channel run candle businesses. I've done a couple recent collaborations with other businesses who make money selling candles. That's their business. So I think that's pretty clear. How messy is candle making? It can be very messy. It's like baking, but the stains last longer. So think of you using your kitchen to bake a cake, and you've got all these different components, materials out. There's always going to be something to clean up afterwards. It's the same with candle making. You're dealing with some wax, some wicks, some oils, whatever, and other materials. So you've got to clean up afterwards, but it's nothing crazy. The biggest mess that's usually caused is wax. If you kind of spilled and made some, depending on how you're melting your wax or whatever, that can cause a little bit of a sticky mess, but it just cleans up. Candle dye is the worst thing. If you are coloring your candles, especially with liquid colorants, they can stain really bad, and they are just a pain in the butt to get out. So the best way to get up candle dye stains or spills is to use something like baby oil can help a little bit, 7X can help, and actually fragrance oil can help get most candle dye up. So don't use too much. That's an expensive way to clean up a mess, but yeah, it can be messy, yes, but it doesn't have to be. Formula for candle making. Well, that's going to vary a lot depending on the type of candle you're making, but I can overview real quickly a basic formula for making a standard jar candle. I don't have one behind me for some reason. I always do. Anyways, a standard jar candle, I would say you need your jar or vessel of some kind. You need your wax, and you need your wick and your fragrance oil, right? Those are your main components. How much wax and fragrance oil is what's going to change a lot depending on the type of wax you're using, how much fragrance oil that wax can hold. But in summary, if you're making a 7-ounce candle, generally speaking, somewhere around 6 to 6.5 ounces of that will be wax. The other half to ounce of that will be fragrance oil. That's what's called an 8 or 9 or 10% fragrance load. Basically, it's the percentage of fragrance you can put into your wax. Then if you're using some dye, you can put in dye, and then whatever wick that is appropriate for that, which you won't know unless you do some testing. and some wick charts and guides out there can kind of help you get going with a good place to start, but it usually requires some tweaking. So is there a set formula? No, other than jar plus the appropriate amount of wax, appropriate amount of fragrance oil, the right wick and color if you're using it. Those 5 core things are generally going to be what you do to make a candle. How many drops of fragrance oils for candles? I would not use drops for fragrance oils. Maybe essential oils, but fragrance oils you want to weigh out because candle making is mostly done by weight. So you're going to weigh your wax, and you're going to take a percentage of that, and that is your fragrance load. So if you want to do a 10% fragrance load into your wax, then you would take the amount of wax times 10%. That's how much fragrance oil it can hold. Now, that was an oversimplification of it, but again, I've got a video that talks about the formulas and how to come up with a candle formula and recipe. But in summary, once you know how much fragrance to use, you want to weigh that in grams or ounces, for example, and that's how you measure fragrance oil, not by drops. All right, let's just do a couple more here. I'm going to just expand a few of these. All right, what happens if you put too much fragrance oil in a candle? Well, a couple things can happen. The first is that if you add too much fragrance than the wax can hold, it can actually seep out of the wax, seep out of the candle. And sometimes that can look like sweating from the candle being in warm conditions, where it will kind of beat up a little bit and start to sweat just because of the temperature. And if you ever see that happening where the temperature is not very warm necessarily, then it could easily be the fragrance oil that is starting to seep out of the wax. And as wax heats up, it expands, and then as it cools, it will contract. And once it's cooled completely, it is retracted at the most. But that constant expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting can actually squeeze fragrance oil back out of the wax if you're using too much. So you won't necessarily see that right away, but after a while, you can start to see that happen. So that is one risk. And the risk associated with that is, first of all, you're wasting product. And it's a lot more expensive to be wasting fragrance oil that's not even being used. But more importantly, once it starts to bead at the top and start to kind of pool up, it can cause wicking issues and it can cause safety issues because fragrance oil does have a flash point. And if that fragrance oil is close enough to the flame, it could actually catch on fire. And that's why you blend it with the wax and you don't just put straight fragrance oil to a flame. And so that is the largest risk with too much fragrance oil in a candle. Not to mention, it just doesn't need that much. Most fragrances and candle waxes are meant to work together at a certain percentage. Anything more than that, at the very least, is just wasting product. All right, let's jump down to why don't my homemade candles smell? This is a great one to kind of finish with, I think, because it's a common issue for new candle makers, is they put all this time and effort into making a product, and when it's done, they can't really smell anything, right? So probably all been there before. There's a lot of things that can cause that to happen. But for the most part, things boil down to the quality of the materials. Again, this is a very general statement, but the truth is, if you're using a good wax that is known to throw fragrance pretty well, and you can find that out through your own research, through candle making groups and websites, you can figure out which waxes are kind of good and popular, which ones are not. So start with a good wax, and then use a reputable candle fragrance oil company. Don't purchase fragrance oils off of Amazon or eBay or from stores that you know, first of all, you can't always get the same ones all the time, but also I would go straight to a good candle material or candle supply source because you know that those are oils tested and designed to work with candles. So start with the right products, the right materials, quality materials like your wax and your oils. But the next thing to really consider is proper wicking. So candles fill the air with scent because of the melt pool that is generated from the heat. And once that melt pool is large enough and hot enough, the fragrance can kind of dissipate or at least make its way into the air around, and that's what you're smelling. So you need a hot enough burning wick to create a melt pool, but you don't want one that's necessarily too hot that it's consuming the candle too quickly, or even potentially so hot that it's sort of burning off the fragrance oil, or at least changing the notes a little bit. So proper wicking, both the type and the size, is really, really important to hot throw as well. Also, the size of the jar. If you're making a candle in a small jar, and I'm talking about the diameter versus one that's in a larger jar where you have maybe 2 wicks or just a larger jar in general, you're going to smell much stronger hot throw with a larger jar, obviously. That's why you put a smaller candle in a bathroom and a larger 2-wick candle in a living room, for example. Now, last but not least is the process that you're using as a candle maker. So yeah, quality materials matter, but you can also still mess up quality materials by using a subpar process. Now, when I say that, Realize that there's not a right or wrong process. Candle making is an art form and a craft as well, and there's multiple ways to do the same thing. But generally speaking, I would stick to the recommendations by the manufacturers and suppliers about how to use your materials, how to use your wax specifically, what temperature to heat the wax to, what temperature to add your fragrance oil. Does the wax require any additives or not? Be sure to thoroughly mix your candles, wick them properly, let them sit for a couple days. And depending on the wax, some argue you need even longer than that. But the point is you want a consistent, repeatable process with good quality materials. If at any point, all of that, you're still not getting a good hot throw, I would first of all have someone else check for you. You can become a little nose blind. You might not be smelling it, or you might just not be super sensitive to the smell in general, or other people might think the candle is quite strong. So definitely check with your peers, but also if you're still having an issue after all of that, it's probably time to try a different fragrance oil. There are hundreds of thousands of fragrance oils out there. It's worth giving several a shot before you give up on an entire formula. If at that point you're still having problems, it might be worth changing your wax. Some waxes are just known to throw better than others in general, but all waxes have trade-offs, pros and cons. Some are better at one thing and worse at another. So it is a balancing act, but in terms of fragrance throw, these are the things that I would be thinking about, the things that I would consider. All right, thanks for watching this video. I'm gonna do some more of these in the future, as well as obviously, of course, address your specific questions and video suggestions as well. So in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and check out this next video. See y'all next time.